Welcome one and all to episode 40 of Titan Teatime. I'm Petter and this is James.
How's it going?
And today we're hosting our final episode of Titan Teatime. This feels strange. It's almost on par on, having the final chapter discussion back in April last
Oh,
year.
really?
Or to me, it's different in certain ways, but it is the end of an era in a way. We've been doing this podcast for over 3 years, and it's been every single month. And with this one, it's 40 months in a row that we've released an episode.
Mm-hmm.
I've said before, I'm really proud of that, and I will be proud of this looking back at it, I'm sure. But it's going to end with this episode, and it just feels a little strange.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I don't think it compares to how I felt when Attack on Titan ended. I think that was just a whole other echelon of emotion. Like, it's just,
Yeah,
you know,
you're right. There were more emotions, I guess, back
yeah.
then.
And it definitely felt like, once we were done and once we finished that discussion, that podcast, it's like, oh gosh, what do I do with my life now?
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, as much as I've loved uh, doing these and our retrospective of both the manga and the anime, going into these side stories as well, I do feel like we've kind of exhausted the number of topics that we really can. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
to be fair, I'm sure there's so much more you could potentially do if you tried to milk it for everything it had.
Right.
But I think there is a point where you need to say, okay, we're good. Like, there's not much more to glean from this, and we got to put an end somewhere.
Precisely. And I figured, or well, both of us, I think we are quite content where it's at right now. And
Yeah.
also ending it at the 40th episode, also, it has a good ring to it, kind of. Actually, I'm quite sure that the episodes that we've been putting out since the manga ended, like all of those episodes that we did, favorite characters, favorite titans, we had the You Hear Big Girls episode, and then all of the manga discussions and the anime discussions and the spin-off manga discussions and all of that, like all of those episodes, I'm quite sure we planned all those out pretty much exactly several months before the manga even was over. So we had this whole plan since a long time back. And I remember back then when we kind of, I guess, considered what types of episodes we wanted to put out after the manga was over.
Mm-hmm.
And we settled on, well, what we have done. One thing that I considered for a while, but that I think we ultimately removed from the plan, was to cover the Before the Fall spin-off manga.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I remember we talked about that, but then I kind of realized that, first of all, it's not that great. Like, it's not bad. I wouldn't call it bad, but it's not great enough to spend 17 volumes rereading that. It's kind of my thought. So that's for anyone who was thinking that, oh, they're doing No Regrets and Lost Girls, maybe they'll do Before the Fall. Well, sorry, we won't. If you want to talk to, at least, I mean, I've read those or that series. If you want to talk to me about it, feel free to join our Discord chats, or talk to. I'll happily discuss it with anyone in there. For anyone who has read it, I actually don't know if I know a lot of people who even have. But anyway, man, I'm really just rambling. But yeah, I guess, well, first things first, we were planning on talking a little bit about the origins of our podcast and kind of what's happened from the beginning up until, well, here at the end where we are right now. I still remember actually very clearly when I came up with the idea to do this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting at work, like it was during, I had like a break at work, and I was just sitting, kind of killing time. And at that time, back then, the YouTube channel where we release our episodes back then was a different type of podcast channel, where we had the Zelda podcast, Fire Emblem podcast, and the plan was to kind of expand it a little bit more into doing different types of podcasts on it. And thanks to that, I guess, my idea came to fruition about starting an Attack on Titan podcast. And I started brainstorming name ideas for the podcast, and I did settle on Titan Teatime. And I'm quite sure this all happened during one day at work, kind of during the break, and then kind of at the end of the work day, I think I was finalizing some ideas, but it was really just the concept until until you and Steven came along and joined me for the to do the actual show together.
And so you came up with the Titan Teatime name?
Yes, I did that. I did the music, which was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun doing the Titan Teatime opening music, or well, the full version of that music, which you can listen to on my YouTube channel, Leon Morris, where I have a bunch of other music. But anyway, that was fun. And the first 10 episodes we had Steven on the podcast, so it was us three. And man, it's been a long time since I listened back to any of those, or honestly, probably any of our chapter discussions. It's been a long time since I listened back to, but especially those early ones. Been a really long time, but it was fun, and we were steadily grown a little bigger, I guess.
Speak for yourself. No, I'm
But
kidding.
I think what's the greatest about this podcast, in my opinion, has been getting to know you, James.
Oh.
Truly, because really, I mean, yes, we've touched on this before, but I don't expect everyone to remember everything we've said on the show, or even to have listened to all of it. We really didn't know each other when we started this podcast.
No.
Like, we sort of knew each other through Steven in various ways, but we barely really knew each other.
We actually barely interacted before Steven and us crossing paths through other ways on Zelda Dungeon.
Yes.
But we were like acquaintances of acquaintances, kind of a thing. I'd hop in. I think Petter was much more in the chat, and sometimes would do Mafia when I would sometimes do Mafia, and then I would very rarely hop in the chat. But I do remember talking to Petter at the time, just very briefly. He's like, "Oh, I like this too. Oh, that's cool." Kind of a
right.
situation.
Yeah.
But that's about it. And then, well, even before Steven, I think it was through
Chase,
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it was really through Chase and David, who kind of wanted to start doing like podcast type of thing.
Yeah.
And then I think Chase reached out to you, and then you guys started your own podcast group, and eventually Steven and decided to try to bring me on for this Attack on Titan podcast.
Yeah.
And I was just really focused on my YouTube channel at the time, but I kind of begrudgingly just agreed to do it because it's hard for me to say no.
I'm glad it was.
I don't know. Like I didn't want something else on my plate, but that I had the reassurance that I really wouldn't be doing much besides preparing my thoughts and just talking. So for me, it turned out to be a really I won't say really easy, but a fairly easy experience. And yeah, like I'm really glad I decided to do that because as we were going through the chapter releases, it just added more excitement to my read through, and honestly helped me understand the Attack on Titan chapters and the new content much better than I probably would have if I was just reading by myself.
Right. I mean, and honestly, I do feel similarly. First of all, I felt like doing the podcast, especially the further into it we got, and the more of a following that we got, I started feeling like I need to kind of be on top of it, like kind of bring my A game to these recordings every month because hundreds of people are going to listen to this. Because that's what our audience turned into especially by the end of our monthly chapter discussions.
Right.
We had usually combining the YouTube views and the podcast platforms views, we were usually over 1,000 listeners, and I mean for me that's a lot. Or for us that's a lot.
Yeah.
And I guess I felt pressure in a way, but it was also a push, like a positive push for me that made me feel like I needed to understand everything as well as possible and really just get invested into the manga even more than I really ever would have otherwise. So I guess similar feeling in that way. And also what I wanted to say was how I really could feel how your, I guess, investment into the manga grew over time, especially during those early episodes. I felt your, I
Hmm.
mean, I could tell you were very interested in it from the start, of course, but
Hmm.
I definitely felt how I felt your interest kind of grow over the course of those episodes. So that was also a lot of fun to follow along with.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to think back on how I definitely had theories about certain things when I was just watching the anime, but it wasn't until we started doing these discussions and I really saw how you would go into the chapter and point out, oh, this is a connection to this, or this is you know this character from all these chapters ago, it has relevance here. I'm like, wait, who was that? So but it got me excited
Mm.
to really dive into the story and kind of better my understanding of the source material. So yeah, I really appreciate the podcast for that. But uh, again, or I guess I should say, mirroring what you said, I think the greatest thing this podcast has given us is the relationship we have, getting to know Petter more, and really kind of opening my eyes to a new perspective, and gaining a new friend.
Yeah.
Really would never have had that without this podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, dude, I'm forever grateful for that. It's really awesome. And it like eventually, it led on to our Umami Manga podcast, which has been even more, or that has become even of a bigger thing than Titan Teatime in a way. I mean, I guess I will technically our most popular podcast episodes are still our or some of our Titan Teatime episodes, but in terms of content that we put out, and not just quantity, but I think quality to an extent as well,
Yeah.
has been on our Umami Manga episodes. Um, so it's led into that pretty big project also. So yeah, it's a friendship and it's a lot of podcasting, so it's a lot of fun in general.
Yeah, it is funny how we've gone from dissecting, 42 pages of a chapter, within maybe 2 hours, maybe more,
Yeah, sometimes more.
um, sometimes more, to, maybe a volume would be an hour and a half or something like that. It's
Sometimes less than an hour for an entire volume.
well, yeah, especially later on, in some of the things we've had. I don't know if it's just like we were less excited which I don't really think that's the case.
No.
It's just different material has different depth to us, I guess. But for
Yeah.
whatever reason, when we had the chapter a month, we just went crazy and had to dissect everything.
Yeah, we went pretty crazy. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And actually, talking about all those episodes that we did, I was thinking, well, of asking you first of all, do you have any favorite Titan Tea Time episodes? Any that come to mind when you think of
Yeah,
some of your favorite episodes that we made on Titan Tea Time?
for sure. Oddly enough, I think that our our Marley discussion, um, is a fond memory I have because it really flipped my opinion on the Marley discussion, and I've referenced it multiple times in the podcast.
Right, you
Probably
you are referring to the first Marley discussion we did, right? Like,
correct, the very first one
yeah,
earlier on in the podcast,
yeah.
um, and I referred to that kind of flip, uh, multiple times, probably to an annoying degree, but it really did leave an impression on me and showed that I had really given that arc, a bad rep. That
Right.
I should have. Well, I think part of it was I just didn't understand what was going on in the long run. But yeah, so that was great, and it was also towards the beginning of the pandemic, the
Yes.
lockdown here in the U.S. So
Mm.
um, it just kind of has a interesting memory and vibe to it all.
Absolutely does. I also had that one listed as one of my favorite episodes because
Oh, nice.
it. I mean, it's kind of funny in a way because we do have the pandemic to thank for that episode existing because that was the
You're
month
right.
when there wasn't an episode release due to the pandemic.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, no, I think that one's also that one was such a different kind of episode, like
Hmm.
early on, because we had only done chapter discussions before then. So yeah, it was a fun kind of different way to do a podcast in that way.
Agreed.
Then of course the final chapter discussion I think is very special and is one that I've enjoyed kind of going back to, re-listening to a little bit, because there's just like just the opening alone of that is funny to me. Just because the way I open up that episode, you can hear in my voice, or at least I can hear it in my voice, just kind of my it's like a mixture of exhaustion and just a bunch of different emotions, like joy as
Yeah.
well as probably a degree of disappointment. But I mean,
Hmm.
I don't know. It was weird, but a fun episode overall, and our longest ever. But yeah, a good episode, I think.
Yeah, I think the final two chapter discussions were some of my favorites,
Mm,
or two of my favorites, because one, it has like a very powerful moment for me, uh, in the Mikasa and Eren portion,
yeah.
and so that really goes down for me as one of my favorite moments. And it was also, that chapter was also one that really got me emotional, and so talking about it again with Petter was fantastic.
Mm.
Um, and then yeah, obviously the final discussion will always go down as one that I love. How do you feel about the? I think we had kind of a follow up discussion when the I guess continued pages were, or like
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The
the
extra
true
pages were
ending,
added.
the
Yeah.
extra pages. Yeah, there you go.
Right.
How do you feel about that discussion versus the first time we talked about it?
I mean, it didn't have the same impact, or like
Yeah.
emotionally, obviously, since I mean, what it added was nice, but it
Hmm.
wasn't, it didn't change anything necessarily, or not too much. However, I do enjoy that episode a whole lot, actually, because there were some points I think we did, or some parts of the discussion that we had there that I really enjoyed a lot.
If I remember correctly, I think your opinion on the final chapter changed for the better after, not necessarily because of the extra pages, but because you had time to think about um,
Yeah.
the chapter. I could be wrong.
No, but no, you're
You'll
right. No,
disagree.
it definitely did. I think it's probably a combination, or it was probably a combination of both. Some extra
Mm-hmm.
time having passed, because I think that was a month and a half or so after the final chapter came out, or something like that. So I'd had more time to process it, which I think in and of itself was good. But also, well, the chapters or the added pages were also good enough to, I think, increase my view of that
Mm.
chapter overall.
Yeah, I think for me, I feel similarly that the emotions in the final chapter discussion were just on a different level. And also with the extra pages, I really was kind of conflicted, because I thought the ending before was pretty good, or I was satisfied
Mm.
and had made my peace with it and everything. And then they added this, and then it was not so much the content itself, it's more like how people reacted that really got me upset. And I just it's just it's so frustrating. Like, I can't have nice things because there's always people on the internet who I mean, they can express their opinions, but then they just take their opinions and
Right.
just push it down people's throats. Like, this is how it should, this is how it is. Like, you're
Yeah.
blinded, or otherwise. It's like,
You are referring to this stuff regarding Mikasa, right?
yeah, yeah, mostly that,
Mm.
on really on both sides of the whole thing, where people were, well, and not just Mikasa, but the um what happens to parody and all that. Like,
Mm.
people were saying that it was all for naught, and that's a terrible way to end the story. And take what you, if that's your opinion, that's fine. But when you try to express, like, well, I actually feel it's kind of fitting for the story, and you explain your reasons,
Yeah.
then they just say, oh, cope, or some other ridiculous things. And that's just internet for you. But
Mm.
it was just kind of frustrating to feel so much negativity, and then also like
Yeah.
overwhelming, well, negativity all around, but also on the other side, people who didn't let people express their opinions. That was also very frustrating.
For
Well,
sure.
if they disliked it and they gave their reasons and weren't like really bad about it, they shouldn't be suffocated because of that. It
Absolutely.
was just it
Mm.
was just really frustrating time. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I guess I didn't get too worked up about it, but I definitely
yeah,
understand
I wish
why
I didn't.
people would. But I guess on that like added or expanded, I guess ending,
Hmm.
I personally liked it. Actually, that was actually a big reason why my overall score of that chapter or the ending in general
Hmm.
was raised for me because before the added chapters came around, I felt like it was possible to interpret the message of the story as genocide is a good thing. Like it leads to
Uh-huh.
something good because that's ultimately what it did. However, with the added chapters by the end, it kind of implies it doesn't necessarily imply that Aaron's genocide led to a good ending.
Hmm.
So I think it it improved the message of the story a whole lot actually. Like it, yeah, because I honestly
Mm.
I was quite displeased with how it was before the those pages were added.
Gotcha.
But I guess one last episode that I wanted to give a shout out to that is very dear to me that I had a blast recording and also like still enjoy going back re-listening to is the one where we had the You Heard Big Girls on our podcast. That one was such a fun podcast to do, especially since
Hmm.
like that was the month right after the final chapter had come out, so like it was kind of the calm after the storm. If that's
Yeah, a bit.
that's not
Yeah.
even really a thing, but still, like that's kind of what it was. Like the whole thing was over, and we just could finally just kind of relax because
Right.
both you and I, as well as both of them, had basically every month for the past several years been covering this manga, and I mean it is exhausting in a way. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
to do that so consistently and as I was talking about a little earlier, like it does come with a sense of pressure from knowing how many people listen to you and kind of are looking forward to your episodes every month.
Hmm.
Um, but with all of that pressure gone, more or less, it was really nice to just sit down and just chill with the two of them. I
Yeah.
really liked that episode.
You're not gonna believe this, but that was also on my list of favorite
Mm,
episodes. So
awesome.
eh, I think it's ironic or not ironic, but interesting that I think we picked the 3 or 4 episodes, the exact same ones. So that's
Yeah,
funny.
that's great. I mean, that's good. I
I
think.
mean, hey, it just shows they really were special. Uh,
Yes.
no, I agree with you that having the episode with You Hear Big Girls was awesome and get their perspective because again it just adds to uh, the different opinions that we get to hear because I think they had a different thoughts on how it all ended,
Mm,
whether good or bad, and I think that it was nice to kind of have that discussion, especially like you said after the storm had disappeared and you
uh-huh.
know things were calm again. Um, but yeah, no, they had a very interesting experience because they were really working close with the fan base in ways, putting
Right.
out polls and their Discord server was much bigger and they brought in guests and
Yeah.
so they were always juggling so many different types of opinions that it was really fun to hear their thoughts and their experience and how they got started and yeah, it was a great
Absolutely.
episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. Yeah. And before we move on to our next discussion points, I guess in case any of our listeners, if any of you guys have a favorite episode or several favorite episodes that you remember a little extra fondly, please let us know in the YouTube comments or on our Discord server. If there's anything like that. Really, everything we're talking about and are going to talk about in this episode, please let us know your thoughts on all of those things as well, because I'm always, yeah, I think it'll be fun to know some other people's thoughts on those things.
Yeah.
For example, the next question, or kind of a list actually that I'm gonna ask for
Mm-hmm.
favorite arcs, like story arcs from
Mm.
the manga. And well, we went through and reread the manga recently, or well, the ending of it was recently. We started probably
This
about a year
past
ago.
year. Yeah.
Yeah. um, and well, yeah, it's the story arcs, basically how most people view them. Except, I guess we did the first 3 arcs or so in one, like because I think technically the fandom divides. Like there's like the Fall of Shiganshina arc, which is only like 2 chapters, and then there's the training arc and the Trost arc, which happened kind of simultaneously in the manga.
Mm.
We just put all of that together and called it the Trost arc. And I think today
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna do that as well. We're gonna lump that all into one arc. And one other little distinction I want to make is that the final arc, which I think the fandom deems to be all of the final or the last 8 volumes, I think, of the manga, which is called
Mm-hmm.
the War for Parity arc. We're only considering the War for Parity arc to be the first 4 volumes of that arc, and then the last 4 volumes of the manga are just the final arc. We're just referring to it as the final arc because I do think it is kind of a thing of its own, and that's how we did it in our reread earlier in the year, and also how we're gonna, I guess, talk about the arcs here, or I guess in our lists. So, James, what's your number 8?
Female Titan arc.
Huh? Funny.
I had grown to appreciate this one more, and I still think that the anime Female Titan arc is better than even the Trost anime arc for some reason. I just think they did a lot of good stuff, and that's all because of the rewatch that we had that I feel that way.
Hmm.
But the story wise, it's not a whole lot necessarily happens to move the plot. It's exciting, and we do get the reveal of Annie as the female Titan, and Aaron's not alone aspect, but
Yeah.
it didn't hit the same highs as a lot of the other arcs, in my opinion.
I actually agree wholeheartedly, and the Female Titan arc is also my number 8.
Beautiful. We're on the same page. I don't think it will last, but yes.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it progresses from here. But yeah, no, I agree, and also, like, I still really love this arc. Even though it is at the bottom.
Of course.
We are both suckers for this manga, so even the worst arc, in our opinions, is still going to be a great arc to us. All right, then. What's your number 7?
You're gonna have to remind me the correct name for this arc. Government arc? Is that
the Royal Government arc?
Yeah. So
Okay.
again, it's not bad, and I think it's in a lot of ways much higher than Female Titan arc, but I do feel like it's in terms of story pacing, it's just not my favorite. I think there is a lot of dialogue. Dialogue's not bad, and there's a lot of good dialogue, but it does kind of drag its feet at times. But it still has some very powerful moments as well. So it's definitely not bad.
Gotcha.
But I think before we had done a read through, this would have been a little bit higher actually. But after the read through, it went down to 7.
Interesting. I mean, that's fair. My number 7 is the Trost arc.
Okay.
So even though, yeah, I mean, again, I love it, but
Yeah.
I do find the rest of the arcs that we haven't mentioned yet, or that I haven't mentioned yet, to be stronger arcs. I do think it's a great start to the story. I love the fake out with Aaron dying. I love Jean's kind of journey from being a jackass, which, I mean, he still remains a jackass to a degree, but to wanting to join the Service Corps by the end of that arc, like that's also one of the highlights for me. But like it's a great arc, but yeah. I guess I'll leave it there for now. So give me your number 6.
Clash of Titans arc.
Oh.
I think this would have been below Government arc before a reread, but after going through the manga and you're seeing Emir and Krista at the time, their kind of dynamic, really appreciating that, and then the reliving the reveal of Bertolt and Reiner, just that amazing moment. It put it up there for me. So yeah, I put it at number 6.
Fair. My number 6 is the final arc.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Fair enough.
While I love it, of course, it is a little messy in my opinion. The thing is, it's got enough highs to make it to my number 6, and like to fair. Better than the ones I mentioned before now, but it does still have things that bring it down to me, such as like the plot is a bit messy, as I said, and I also I don't know, the ending definitely isn't perfect still, in my opinion, even though it did grow on me a lot.
Uh-huh.
And little things like that. But yeah, I mean, still a worthy final arc, all things considered.
Yeah.
So, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is Trost arc. Trost has always
Mm.
been a special arc for me, because it, like everybody else, it introduces you to the story, the characters, and makes you fall in love with some of your favorites. I think for me, it
Mm-hmm.
was Mikasa and her backstory. That is one of the most impactful backstories that I've, because I saw it in the anime first.
Mm.
It's the most impactful one that I had seen at the time, and to this day, really. And yeah, like, as you mentioned, the fake out of Aaron's death, his reveal that he's a Titan,
Yeah.
and just setting up the mysteries that were um, at play. Just for me, it was it still is a strong arc in my opinion.
It absolutely is. It really is. And my number 5 is the Royal Government arc. Um, I wanted to put it higher, but after giving it some thought, I felt like there were still 4 others that deserved to be put above the Royal Government arc. The Royal Government
Uh-huh.
arc, but it's still, I don't know. The Royal Government arc marks such a big shift in the story, in my opinion, um, toward it being kind of less of a shonen in its vibes, kind of, and
Mm.
I don't know. It just it feels much more mature than the arcs that came before it, and I really appreciated that and kind of the characters that it introduces, like Kenny mainly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know the focus on some of the characters that we hadn't seen, I guess, had too much focus before, like Levi and Erwin and Hanji, kind of got to shine more in this arc than they had before it. But yeah, it's great. So your number 4 was that?
These top four is really hard for me. Well, I think my number one was somewhat easy actually, but the,
Uh-huh.
the 2, 3, and 4 were really hard. So depending on the day, they may kind of switch places.
That's fair, fair.
But okay, I'm gonna go with.
Number 4.
Yeah, I know, I know. I've written it down, but I'm like it's right here, but I'm like, do I want? I'm gonna change it up.
Oh, okay.
So I'm gonna say the final arc.
Gotcha.
I actually had this higher up, but after doing some thinking, and I agree with you that there is some messy points and some parts where it's a little slow. But
Hmm.
despite that, it has some of the highest highs in in my opinion in the story, and I love the ending. I think it's this bittersweet, really complicated type of ending, and a bit confusing. I'll admit, but I think that it makes it unique in that way. And um, Aaron's character is probably one of the most fascinating and tragic characters that I've read about.
Yeah.
I love Mikasa's kind of resolve at the end, and her role in the story. Armin's role is established better, and
Hmm.
the relationship between Armin and Annie was great. I mean, could be better, of course, but I thought it was sweet as someone who had to kind of ship them for a while.
Uh-huh.
Um, and yeah, so there was a lot of good things from that arc that would make me want to put it higher, but I feel that these other arcs just are more consistent in their I guess awesomeness in their
Yeah.
in the high quality.
Yeah, no, their awesomeness. I think that's accurate.
I couldn't think of a word.
Well, and, that's great. That's great. My number 4 is the War for Parity arc.
That's good. That's good.
I think maybe I'm a little bit biased in my love for this arc with how this was when we started our podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and these were the first 4 episodes that we did on Titan Teatime covered the last 4 episodes of this arc. The way we're dividing it anyway,
Yeah.
and and I mean it really is especially those specific episodes, like those Paths episode with Aaron and Zeke, which are kind
Mm-hmm.
of the climax of the War for Parity arc. That's like such an incredible part of the story in my opinion. But
Yeah.
also, Gabby had an amazing journey through that arc,
Mm-hmm.
and just in general, it is a great arc through and through. Although maybe the beginning of it is a little bit weird or slow or whatever you want to call it, but even those parts of it are great. Like there's like flashbacks that I enjoy much more than I like, or especially on a reread, that I enjoyed a lot of those flashbacks a lot more than I remembered I did. For example, the one where they're on the rails and talking about how much they all care about each other, kind of, or well, Aaron cares about all of them, and everyone just
Uh-huh.
like blushing, and like there's a lot of sweet moments in this arc, and
Mm.
yeah, I love it a lot. It's not just bias; it is also me recognizing that it is an amazing arc.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um. So for the top three, why don't you give all of your top three in one go?
So my number three is Marley.
Mm.
This is one that has just risen over time for me, from being really at the bottom to all the way to number three. And I love Reiner's journey, his just mental state, and the writing for him
Mm.
um, really makes him one of your favorite characters,
Absolutely.
at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
And and then the whole declaration of war chapters, like those, fantastic. The
Yeah.
stage, and then Aaron's confrontation with Reiner, and then his transformation.
Uh-huh.
Just an amazing chapter. 100 might go down as one of my favorite chapters, or as my favorite chapter, but
Mm.
hard to say. Um, yeah, and Marley is just it's a strong, uh, I almost like beginning of a new series, kind of
Yeah.
a arc, as
Absolutely.
we've explained in previous
Yeah.
discussions.
So strong.
So my number two is War for Parity. Um, and you were saying how you were biased. I put it number two, so I must be the most biased one. My opinion on this one has changed since the reread, which is a common theme. I think when we were reading through it, I was really frustrated with the lack of information of what Aaron was thinking, and that's basically all the way up to the very end of the story. The last chapter, we didn't really know Aaron's plans, but it was in War for Parity where we had kind of the aloof emo Aaron, and how he had with the whole table scene telling them he hated Mikasa and Armin. It was really
Mm.
frustrating. And then you get the scene with uh, Zeke and Aaron, and then it just changes everything. And that's what makes this arc so special, because you have the great contrast between kind of silent and, you know, brooding Aaron, and then this is the real Aaron, and he's here. This is his plan to get to this moment, and
Mm.
the path's journey. And on top of that, you have Zeke kind of coming to terms with who his father was, and that his father did love him, and, you know,
Yeah.
overcoming his father issues. And I think there was something beautiful about that as well. So just so
Very.
many
Mm.
moments, and Emir's backstory just, for me, it it is one of the peaks of Attack on Titan.
Very, very true.
but the peak of the peak, nothing could top it. Return to Shiganshina. I when I went down this list, I said number one. Well, what could be number one? Return to Shiganshina. Like it was hardly a second thought. You know,
Yes, I'm not
um,
surprised to hear this, I will say.
it, I you know I think that in terms of writing and what that arc accomplishes, and what comes of it, is nothing compares out of the rest of Attack on Titan. I mean,
Huh.
I've loved every arc, but this is the peak, and I don't even have to go into detail because I know everyone really loves it as well.
I mean, yeah, it is. It is I mean, yeah, I would probably assume it might be like overall the number one. Like if every Attack on Titan fan in the world would get to vote, this one might probably win, and for
Like
good reason.
average wise, yeah.
Right. I would think so anyway. Yeah. Yeah. No, but yeah, that's a good top three. Absolutely. And so for mine, my number three is the Clash of the Titans arc.
Huh.
And what number did you? Where did you have this one in your list? Kind of low.
6.
6.
Come on. Well, okay, what? So when the arcs that I love are low, I don't get mad. I like that's your opinion.
Yeah, no. But I mean, I'm aware. You know, these are all such good arcs that even the low scoring ones are still great.
Absolutely.
I understand this. But anyway, yeah, Clash of the Titans arc. This was really when I mean I loved since both James and I experienced the first 2 seasons of the anime before we started reading the manga, and it really was like I loved the first season. I loved it a lot. Like it became one of my favorite anime very quickly. However, it wasn't until I saw the second season when I became like so I guess such a big fan that I just had to start reading the manga. It was that arc that got me over that edge, I guess. And I'd probably say, I mean, Reiner, of course I have a soft spot for Reiner. I have ever since this arc really. And
Oh,
just
really?
kind of
Really?
I mean, to a degree, not as much as in the Marley, of course. Like Marley was like that's when he actually became my favorite character. He wasn't. I wouldn't have considered him my favorite character back then, but it was all of the kind of mystery surrounding his. I mean, because he kind of became kind of the spokesperson for whatever the society was outside the walls or beyond the walls. You know.
That's fair. Yeah.
And not only did he kind of represent that from this arc onward, or for a while at least, he also had this interesting kind of split personality or dissociative identity that became apparent in this arc, and that I don't know, it was also a switch to something different that we hadn't really seen previously in the story. Not as big of a switch as say the Uprising arc or the Marley arc, but still it made it went in a more mature direction than I had probably assumed that this story would go necessarily. Like it was gory and stuff before that, but it wasn't necessarily psychological, or if that makes sense. But anyway, yeah, it was an interesting arc to me. Interesting enough that it got me into manga. Like really, it was through Attack on Titan that I became a manga reader to begin with, and it was thanks to this arc. So yeah, it's very dear to me. My number 2 is Return to Shiganshina. Also love it to death.
Nice.
And honestly, yeah, I probably don't have a whole lot to add about that one. It's just a super solid arc.
I mean, like,
neither one of us is saying anything about it.
I know.
Yeah, this is
I
a
was
great
like,
arc.
I thinking back, I was like, why didn't I say anything about it? Like, I guess I don't know. Let me just say that the confrontation or the Levi's choice and Midnight Sun, that's an amazing thing.
Of course.
The confrontation with the Beast Titan, how Armin and Eren take down Bertolt and the other guys take down Reiner. I just think that because it feels like it's impossible odds, but they somehow pull it off, and believingly so. Like,
right.
That's amazing. And then the truth in the basement and everything that happens after that, it's just that's what makes it a solid arc.
It really, and it's so like thinking about it, like not right now when I'm just thinking about like thinking back to that arc, or whenever I do think back to that arc, it's always kind of like very clearly like 2 parts. There's the battle in Shiganshina, and then there's the basement secrets, like about Marley, and it's so it seems so simple, kind of, but when you actually read it, like when you actually go back and reread it, there's so much more to it than just those 2 chunks, I guess, and it's really a masterful piece of literature.
It really is, yeah.
However, what in my opinion is an even more masterful piece of literature is the Marley arc. So that is my number 1.
Yeah, I get like how my Return to Shiganshina was not surprised. The really Marley arc being number 1 for you is not a surprise either.
Yeah,
but
it has been my favorite arc ever since that arc ended, pretty much. And it made Reiner my favorite character, and it really kind of touches me more than definitely any other part of Attack on Titan does, and really more than almost any other piece of fiction does. This arc is super special to me, and the structure of the story in it. And I mean, I don't know. I could probably enjoy this story just isolated by itself.
Mm.
Honestly, just in and of itself, it's just a beautiful story. I mean, obviously, because it introduces a lot of brand new characters, it doesn't necessarily rely too much on what came before it.
Right.
Obviously, it still does, and
Yeah.
it shouldn't be read by itself without any other context. But still, I think it's a great read, and it's definitely the arc that I've reread the most times. I reread this arc more times than I know, like just because I love it so much. But before we move on to anything else, really, I actually have a different question for you about arcs, because
Hall.
something I don't think I've ever really talked about this with anyone, but something that I've thought about for quite a long time about the story of Attack on Titan is that, well, yeah, it is divided into these, well, 8 arcs, at least the way that we're talking about it, which I think is a fair way to divide it. Which each is 4 or 5 volumes long. So yeah, roughly the same amount of volumes per part. However, I've also thought about the way to divide the story into 3 arcs, like three
Hmm.
bigger arcs, where the first arc consists of the Trost arc, the female Titan arc, and ends with the Clash of the Titans arc.
Okay.
Like that being arc 1, which I have dubbed the Rage arc, and that's since each of those 3 arcs within it are 4 volumes long. That's the first 12 volumes of the story.
Mm-hmm.
The middle arc in this way to divide into 3 would be the Royal Government arc and the Return to Shiganshina arc, which each is 5 volumes long, so it's 10 volumes. So that's roughly the same as the previous 12. It's not that big of a change, and I call this one the Truth arc because this was when a lot of truths were starting to come out in various ways from the basement, but also from the Rice family and all of that. And then the last third I would call the War arc. That's starting the Marley arc, followed by the War for Parody and the final arc.
Hmm.
And I don't know, for at least like 2 or so years now, or at least since around the time when the manga ended, I've thought about this way to divide the story, which and I kind of feel like it makes sense, and I like this way to divide the story as well. So I guess first of all, I just wanted to share that
Mm-hmm.
quickly like that, and also ask how would you rank those 3 arcs versus each other?
Yeah. How would I rank them? I would probably put the first arc at the bottom.
Me too. I guess I'll go along with you with this, but yes, I do as well.
I it's really hard to decide between the second and third one. Um,
Yeah.
because while I do have the Royal Government arc at number 7, um, do think it's pretty important for the events of um Return to Shiganshina.
Mm.
But I think the best arc is the third one. I mean, it kind of has more going for it.
Mm. Mm.
In that way, a lot of highs in one arc.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I probably go 1, 2, 3
Right. Yeah. Or 3, 2, 1, or whatever order.
from starting from the bottom. 1, 2, 3.
Right. 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 Yeah. And yeah, my list looks the same way, and I think this is a good sign, showing that the story, at least overall, only gets better,
That's fair.
at least according to the two of us.
That's fair.
And any listener, let us know your thoughts, not only on, I guess, these fan 3 chunk arcs that I've made up, but also the actual arcs. Let us know how you would rank them against each other. Next up, I guess we're gonna talk a bit about some of our favorite moments. We've already kind of touched on a lot of them throughout the arc
Mm-hmm.
discussions, but some of just favorite like scenes slash I guess
Yeah.
character moments in general throughout the story. I'll mention probably, possibly at least, my number one right off the bat, which to avid listeners of this podcast might not come as a surprise, but it is the scene that was cut out of the anime from the Marley arc, where Reiner and Gabby are, walking on the street bonding and talking, and Gabby telling Reiner how when she inherits his Titan, she will be able to understand the things that are too painful to put into words and all that. Like, that scene is so dear to me, and like I love it so much. Every time I read it, I become a little little wet in my eyes.
Hmm.
It's great. It's awesome, and it's arguably my number one in terms of just favorite scenes in general from this manga.
Yeah, no, it's a shame it wasn't in the anime for sure. Do
Mm.
you think that your like of that moment is only strengthened because it was slighted from the anime?
I don't. I don't know. I guess I don't know. I guess I.
Not to say you can't. Of course, that can be your favorite one. It's just,
Yeah.
sometimes when it's brought when something has adversity, it makes you love it more.
Fair. You're right. And since maybe I'm biased, maybe I can't give a good response to that question.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't think I could say either. I mean, that would be presumptuous of me.
Right, it would. But yeah, no. I mean, maybe it is. So what's one of your favorites?
Yeah. So one of my favorites is, I guess Peter already mentioned that we've definitely discussed these in our reread, but you know, I'll just name a couple.
Yeah, yeah.
Chapter 50, when you
Mm.
have the moment with Aaron and Mikasa. Um, Mikasa's basically giving up, and then Aaron turns around and is like, "I'll keep wrapping that scarf around you again and again." And that kind of ties
Yeah,
into chapter 138, and
yeah.
where Mikasa has that vision of what life could have been if she had answered differently. And then when she
Mm.
cuts off Aaron's head, and the kiss, a lot of people were upset about that. Yeah, it's necrophilia. It's like so funny. Um, I think it's such a bittersweet moment. And
Absolutely.
it really solidified this ending as one that I enjoyed. Um, because it was hard for me to see a character that I liked in Aaron to kind of become this villain. Um, and especially since I loved Because and Aaron so much as a ship, this was kind of a very bittersweet moment for me. So
Understandable. Mm.
but that makes it one of my favorites.
Yeah. No, I understand that. Yeah. I guess you mentioned the basement scene, in Marley chapter
Mm-hmm.
100, Aaron and Reiner. I mean, just have to just mention it. We don't have to go in depth, but it's just such a brilliant piece of writing or and art and everything. Like it's fantastic. As well as you also mentioned Serum Bowl or the Midnight Sun chapter. Also really one of the most kind of thought provoking and interesting scenes where like whenever I kind of meet a new Attack on Titan fan, or well, a lot of the time, I like to ask them, would you have resurrected Armin or Irvin? It's such a question that it's so funny to hear different people's takes on it because
Yeah,
it really
it's
is,
true.
at least based on my understanding, it's a super even split in the fandom and as to like who people would have chosen there. So it's just such a funny or interesting scene and it's so well done.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Last moment I'll mention. I mean, of course, like we can keep going on and mention
We
moments.
we
So many
could.
good, but the last one I'll mention is Aaron and Zeke in Paths.
Yeah,
Just that whole sequence and what goes down in that, it was just really masterfully written, in my opinion. Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. I second that one absolutely. It's easily one of my favorites, and it really was it really was the moment that's like kind of solidified Grisha as one of my all-time favorite Attack on Titan characters.
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
definitely. And actually, and then I'll give my last one, which is also set in that in down there in the Crystal Catacombs, is in the Royal Government arc when Historia is finally resisting her father down there, and
Mm,
she's moving against him, and she's setting Eren free, and like that moment for Historia is such an incredible moment, and easily my favorite moment of that arc, and also easily one of my favorite moments in the story as a whole.
fair. Yeah.
Mm. So yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of moments, but yeah, we probably should try to keep it to not too many here. um, Well, actually, I'll give a quick shout out without going in depth. I just can't.
Yeah, no,
I
feel
just have
free.
to mention the campfire scene in the final arc, with
Oh,
after the alliance had just they just formed.
yeah.
That's also a super dear scene to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you have any scene you want to give a shout out to as well, feel free to.
Oh, well, since you insist,
Yeah.
uh, I think the Mikasa's backstory scene. I just
Oh yeah.
it's gruesome, but it the message kind of is throughout the story of you know you have to fight, or you win. I can't even think of the phrase now.
Yeah. If you don't fight, you can't win, or
Yeah,
something
something like
along
that.
those lines.
Yeah.
And it's a cruel world, and all of that.
Well, yeah, also that one too. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. No. So many great moments, and really hard to pick only a few. Because I had noted down like a really long list. Now I was like, man, I cannot go through all of this.
Oh, I mean, don't let me hold you back. Feel free.
No,
Like,
no, no, no. I want to hold myself back on this
oh,
one
okay,
because
okay.
I realize it's too much. so James, how are you? I think I know the answer, but how are you gonna rate? How would you rate Attack on Titan, the manga, I guess specifically, as a whole?
Yeah, I don't think there's any way I cannot give it a 10 out of 10.
Mm.
You know, despite the maybe ending that some people would not view as perfect or even good, I think it's a solid ending to a masterful story that really surprises you, um, touches you emotionally, and just lives rent free in your mind for a long time. And I think that's what a true masterpiece is. So for me, it's a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, worthy. Honestly, it's 10 out of 10 from me as well. It's just such a special piece of fiction for me. Like, it was my all-time favorite piece of fiction in general for many
Mm-hmm.
years. Um, and while it's not my absolute favorite anymore, it still remains one of my favorites. And for having been my favorite for such a long time, it holds a really special place in my heart. Uh, Kind of unlike some of the stories that I like even more than this one on a technical level, it's still such a special one to me that it's got to be a 10 out of 10. But yeah, again, listeners, please let us know how you would rate this story, as well
Yeah.
as give us some of your favorite moments from the story, as we did. Always fun to read about that. And I think that kind of brings us at least kind of near the end of this episode. I don't think we have any other kind of points to talk about regarding Attack on Titan itself. As we've said, we kind of kind of exhausted our well, we've exhausted ourselves in
Yeah,
terms of talking about Attack on Titan at this point.
right. It has to come to end at some point, and I think this
Yeah.
is a great way to do it. I feel satisfied where we are and what
Mm.
we've talked about.
Yes, me
Um,
too.
and clearly, most people have already moved on. I mean, there's probably still some rabid fans who happen to be listening to this podcast. Hey, thank you for listening. No,
Yeah, no,
um,
no, but thank you very much
uh,
to anyone who's still listening. Definitely.
absolutely. All two of you. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. There's more than that.
It's just you and me.
It's just us. No, we just do this for us anyway.
I mean, yes, ultimately, yeah.
Ultimately, it's the truth. But no, I think it's time to end this chapter of our podcasting career.
Mm.
But it's not the end of podcasting in general. We still have Umami Manga.
Precisely. So things are really not going to change that much. We're still going to be talking about manga, just not Attack on Titan that much. Since, in case anyone doesn't know, we do also have our other podcast called Umami Manga. If you're listening to us on YouTube, you probably know about it since our Umami Manga content exists on the same channel as our Titan Teatime content. But if you're listening on the podcast platforms, then you may not be aware of Umami Manga. Well, maybe. And in that case, you can easily find it by probably searching for Umami Manga on your same on the same place where you listen to Titan Teatime. And well, we cover a variety of other manga there, and the ones that we cover, at least at the moment, are Kaguya-sama Love is War, To Your Eternity, Spy Family, Free Run Beyond Journey's End, Vinland Saga, Kaiju number 8, Jujutsu Kaisen, and most recently we started covering Asadora. So it's really a pretty good variety of quite different stuff that we are covering over there. And I mean, I imagine it's hopefully something for everyone, kind of. However, I guess I will also announce that our Umami Manga show will move over to a bi-weekly release schedule starting kind of around now from next week or so. Since, well, I started studying back in the middle of August, and with that, I haven't got as much time anymore for podcast recordings, podcast preparations, and podcast, editing, which really takes most of the time for those. But we will still continue, and really, it's not really going to change that much in a way, because Umami Manga itself, because for the past 17 months or so, I think, we've been putting out an episode every single Friday, with one of those per month being a Titan Teatime episode, and every other Friday, except for one per month, being Umami Manga episodes. So Umami Manga, as its own podcast, has never been completely weekly anyway, since once every month we released Titan Teatime instead of Umami Manga. However, Titan Teatime is going to end, and Umami Manga is going to move over to a bi-weekly release schedule. Bi-weekly meaning not twice a week, but rather every other week. I think it can mean both, depending on how you see it.
I'm pretty sure
so
it is.
Just making that clear. So sadly, it's going to be a little bit less than usual. However, I think based on how it's been prior to now, it's been 3 to 4 episodes per month of Umami Manga. And now we're going down to it being 2 to 3 episodes per month of Umami Manga. So it's really only going to be one less episode per month of Umami Manga than it has been. So yeah, it's not going to be that bad. Even in the future, we might go back to a more, I guess, frequent release schedule for Umami Manga. But for now, or from now on, it's going to be bi-weekly. So just for about that. But it's going to continue. So there's going to be a lot of content being covered on there, and I'm very much looking forward to all of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how does one end a podcast? Like a whole podcast series. I've never done this before, or actually I have once, but that was on a much smaller scale. How does one do this? Do you know, James?
I mean, I don't know for a fact, but I assume you thank the listener for listening. You plug Umami Manga in the Discord again, and then you say goodbye and see you later.
Man, the way you say it like that makes it sound so easy. But this is emotional. This is a little bit emotional too. I will admit it's not as emotional as it was when the whole Attack on Titan manga was ending. I will agree with you there. But still, this is a little bit emotional for me. Our Discord. We do have a Titan Teatime Discord server. It's linked in the description. You're free to join there, but really it's not that active, so it's not something that we're really advertising with too much. But we, speaking of Umami Manga that we mentioned before, the Discord server for that is also in the description, and that's a growing and far more active server and a lot of fun. A bunch of great people, and would love to see that one grow more. So if you want to join that, feel free to. And Umami Manga itself, of course, as we mentioned, we cover a bunch of different podcasts on there again, and we're going to continue that one. So if you just want to listen to us talking about more manga, then check out Umami Manga. And if you enjoy our content, you can follow us on Twitter at Umami Manga, and it would be lovely if you'd like to support us by rating our show on the podcast platforms and subscribing to our channel, Umami Manga, on YouTube. If you like this episode, please share it with anyone you think might enjoy it too. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on Umami Manga. Bye-bye.
See you later.
it's kind of gonna be nice to just have one podcast now, in a way,
Mm.
because whenever I kind of talk to new people and somehow the discussion comes up, or the topic comes up that I do podcasting, people are always curious, like, oh, well, what's the name of your podcast? And every time I have to explain, well, I technically do two podcasts, and like it always it feels so kind of partially. I feel a little bit pretentious, and also a little bit like it's just a little bit messy. But from now on, I'll just be able to say, no, it's called Umami Manga. That's my podcast. I don't do any other podcasts than that. Like, but up until now, it's just been a little bit of a hassle. Like, well, if we do one where we talk about this one manga, and then we do the other one where we talk about a bunch of different manga. Like, it's just it also comes off as, I guess, unnecessarily nerdy or something.
Hey, man, at least you're telling people. I'm just like, no, no.